Crystal Deal With It focuses on bridging the gap between where you're at now and where you'd like to be. We'll explore wisdom and techniques from a wide variety of domains and industries and apply them to your unique challenges. I love developing frameworks, processes, and storytelling metaphors that enable personal and business growth. Through actionable next steps, we'll build momentum and confidence. My goal is to help you clear roadblocks, do more with what you have, and realize the potential of yourself and your team. So throw your challenges my way, and Chris will deal with it.
Welcome to the first CDWI workshop. Workshops are live working sessions where I dive deep into a specific problem or focus area alongside a special guest. Today's workshop will be relevant for anyone interested in publishing and marketing creative works, self-publishing, art copyrights, licensing and commissioning, board, card, and role-playing games, product production and logistics, or retail and distribution. I'm really excited to introduce you to Lauren Bilanko, owner of Studio Bilanko and co-founder, owner of the 20-sided store in Brooklyn, New York City. Today's workshop is going to kick off with Lauren's question. I've built the fictional World of Mira over many projects stretching beyond the past decade. I bootstrapped many experiences in this world, all of which require learning as I go. But I struggle with where to start with all my plans to expand the world. Being on the retailer side of things, I have a lot of experience with what a game needs to have in order to sell, but I do not have any experience with working with publishers, distributors, printers, or manufacturers. Here with Lauren Bilanko, owner of the 20-sided store. So I've known Lauren for a long time. Her and Luis Chato have owned 20-sided store for over 11 years now. Yeah. I was very happy to be one of the first part of the community they started building back at the start, and they're still going strong. They're always expanding, but Lauren's been someone who's been very supportive of my work, both with the board games and with the writing, and has some just really great content that I wanted to bring to the show. So Lauren, introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Lauren Bilanko, and yes, Luis and I own the 20-sided store in Brooklyn. You can come and visit us anytime. We're holding it strong here in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, so having a good time, running games, creating a community to bring people together, even in these really tough times right now. So, it's been a roller coaster ride during the pandemic, but things are going strong and we're happy to be here. So.
Yeah, I feel like every time I'd visited over the years, it just got bigger and bigger. Even after I moved out of the city, I'd come back and there's a whole other wing or
yeah, I know. I'm always rearranging and we've been, it's funny because during the pandemic, so we had a huge gameplay space in the back of the store. I'm sure you remember.
Oh, yeah.
And during the pandemic, we couldn't do in-person events. So we moved everything virtual and we're running games online. And then I sort of just spread out all the retail so that was more social distancing and room for people to move around. And so just kind of put all displays in the back where the tables were for the in-store play. And everybody, was like, whoa, your store's so big,
Yeah.
And I was like, and I used to be like, we crammed so much in such a tight spot. But now I'm like, now we spread everything out. And then over the 2 years, we just filled that space. So now it's like we can't. It's so hard. It's like, we want to bring in-person events back, but I'm like, how do I scale back now and, take over that space? I'm going to have to get another space to run events.
But I think it's important. I wanted to give people a little more context before we get into your questions for the show. But
yes.
You had that nice blend of the community building. You also had the retail space, and you've been a retailer in the gaming space for almost a decade now, both Magic the Gathering, role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons. You had a lot of figures, so you had a lot of tabletop gaming.
D&D miniatures. We do mini painting and
exactly.
paint-alongs and stuff like that. Yeah.
So sorry, there's the other one.
We have a big mini section. People.
But you had these different facets, but you really understand the retailer side of the equation. I think it's really important to know just how strong of a community that you built. You've always been very supportive of there's actually a good scene for New York City board game designers, which I was a part of early on. Which is a story for maybe another podcast about how it really helped inform the writing side. But even then, because you had the storytelling elements of role-playing games, you were also really supportive of local authors and artists. And being an artist that kind of covers a lot of different types of art, which I know you'll get into in some of your questions. But it really comes back to that community that you've built over the years. The fact is, you have this wide community of people that may even not live in New York City anymore, like myself, but still want to keep up and try to support the store whenever possible. I know early on when we had our board game Epigo, you were very helpful in selling it, helping me with our pitch on how to sell it. You just had a great perspective on it, and you've always been so free with advice and helping people and creators out. And being on this podcast early on is another thank you, because there have been a few touch points that, again, throughout, I've just been the beneficiary, but you do that for so many different people. So it's nice to kind of give back a bit here today.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah. I mean, I have a lot of ideas, and I have a lot of, when I have something that I learn, I just want everybody to, know it too. So I love, the Game Designer Spotlights have always been one of my favorite events, because I think people really do love to not only, a lot of people aspire to make their own games, and not everybody has the means to do it. And I think a lot of people who love games are whether they want to make their own game or not, they're very interested in how that works. And they love to meet the designers and support local game designers. And I think now more than ever, we're really moving more towards getting a lot of indie games in the store. And we have shipping, so we can ship things now all over the United States. So we are widening our network,
Awesome.
which is also very exciting. So local is now more than New York, which is super fun,
That's important to know for myself.
I know. Now we have to say like indie instead of local. I guess local is like, can you actually be in the store for a spotlight? But now we've got all these other opportunities for these kind of podcasts and other ways to spotlight people. So I'm honored to be here, honestly.
Yeah. It means a lot, and that's where it's a great story too, because you started small. You got the small. I remember that it was almost like a hallway at first, right?
Yeah, it was a hallway.
Yeah, but you were holding Big Magic events. You made it work,
yeah.
And you listened to what people were, how they were interacting with the store, getting feedback, what products were selling, which are not. You had that organic growth. The point now where you're distributing, you're indie, not just local. You were able to adapt through the pandemic for a retailer in Williamsburg. That's saying something, right? Especially in the board game space, because a lot of, especially for role playing games too, which I know is part of what we're gonna talk about today. That's a very, very hard trick to pull off. But being more diverse and being more open and being helpful for so many years gave you a lot of opportunities to grow. We'll touch on that theme, I think, quite a bit through this discussion. And again, I have to thank you also, because that community extended beyond just the games, right? I remember I had a local group of writers. We did a short story, I think, through the 20-sided website.
Yeah.
Which I think the first short story ever technically published. And we had a nice event at the end where I brought in other local writers, and we had this great writing event. It was the first time I really read to a wider audience, and it was very impactful. Like, it gave me a confidence boost at a really critical time when I was considering, like, hey, do I really want to do this or not?
Yeah.
But
I mean, it's still up. I have the links. I don't know if it's like directly linked.
It's still up there.
It's buried, because it's on a blog, but the links are there if you want to share the links with the audience for that story. It's a really great short story. And we released it in a couple different chapters, right? Like over several weeks, I think is how we did it.
Yeah, but you just made the whole event so comfortable. Made everybody feel welcome. It just was awesome that everyone had a great time, but it was just, again, getting those boosts of confidence. I know that I'm just one of the many people you've helped. And I want to use that as kind of a dovetail for you to maybe talk about World of Mira and why you want to come on the podcast and talk about what you need help dealing with.
Yeah, I feel like, from being on the retail floor and having that kind of perspective where I can see what people are interested in and what they want to buy. I know what packaging design should look like, and I know what information needs to be on the box to help a retailer sell a game. But yeah, with the World of Mira, I've been developing this whole world, and we were using it during so it was basically a way for me to have unique Dungeons and Dragons games. So I wanted to create a setting in a world so our Dungeons and Dragons events that we were running at the 20-sided store would be unique to any other place. You couldn't play those games anywhere. So it sort of started off as a little micro setting, just set in the city of Black Bottom before we even kind of built out the rest of the globe, and then during the pandemic, we were doing regular world building episodes on Twitch. And so we started to build out all of the contents and the weather and, all these other things. And for a long time, I had an idea for what I call a reverie deck, but it's a tarot deck. And originally it was going to be based off of a moon cycle, but then when we started building out the World of Mira, I was like, well, it should be set in Mira, and Mira has 3 moons and 2 suns. So we need to base it off of that cycle. So I started creating this whole new game system essentially. And then I worked with a friend of mine who is like a really great business consultant for creatives. And he just has a way of helping you kind of see bigger. Yep. Is the best way that I can. So what turned out to me just like a tarot deck that I made with like magic card images as like a little template when I was playing D&D and I would use in my games. Now is, we're working with artists, and I've been writing a lot and creating systems, and there's games within the game, and it's going to have all these different purposes, and hopefully will be published as the first lore book to the World of Mira for people that want to play in Mira as a role-playing game. But I would also love Mira to expand to be bigger than that and be its own intellectual property to license out for TV, films, books, whatever. I dream big. Okay.
Yeah, that's important.
So a lot of the things, that I find where I need, help with, and where I thought, your expertise as being somebody who published a game that we sold in our store is, where do you get your games printed, and how do you source printers and find, there was a little bit of, I don't know, just there's a lot of questions that I have, especially about legalities of stuff and licensing stuff. And even with the 20-sided store, like the more we get popular and people are interested in what we're doing and they see the success that we're having, like everybody wants to name their things 20-sided, and it's like, but we kind of have that name, so like, how do I protect my, without getting into like, obviously like copywriting and stuff like that, but like I know with games there's more to it, and with licensing the art from, or buying the art outright, right? I know there's so many options, and for me this whole world is, I'm learning it as I go, and I know I've been picking up a little bit here and there, and obviously I have game designers that I can touch upon, but also during the pandemic a lot of places have gone under, and I don't really want to work with printing houses and overseas where I'd love to work locally, but then things get really expensive, so many concerns.
Well, and so I live on the day job, right? I'm part of a distributor manufacturer of mechanical parts. I'm seeing just the most insane supply chain sourcing environment of all time.
Right. It's crazy. I mean, we're seeing it from the retail business where like we just can't get staple games that, our business kind of relies on.
But
it's like,
the people that print the games can't even get the paper.
Right. I know.
And so I'm going to try to keep this more on the creative side of things, obviously with the board games, and also all my experience in publishing books and writing the books. There's a lot to bite off, so we might bounce around a little bit.
I know. There's so much. It's like, I want to write adventures, and I want to publish a tarot deck, and I want to create courses for people. I know I'm all over the place. So honing me in and getting me, to try to think strategically is also a big conversation we can have here.
But I think you're starting from the best place. Well, you started with the right stuff. You started with the content, right? You have a really strong world. It's well developed. You've been testing it over a long period of time. You have a really good sense of what it's like to be in that world, to play games in that world. And you've also got a pre-built audience who's been part of this world for...
Yeah, since 2018, I realized, like parts of it, right? Like it's changed a lot over the years. And I think we weren't really officially calling it Mira until 2019. 2018 was definitely sort of still kind of keeping things just system neutral and kind of loose, but already sort of restructuring just the way we even write adventures to make them easier for our game masters to run, for our guides to run in the store, and that sort of thing too. So
it's important here that there's going to be constraints whenever you talk about manufacturing or products, right? You're creating something that exists at a certain period of time. It's got a UPC code or an ISBN number. It's there. It's somewhat immalleable.
but those constraints can also drive some of the creativity. Actually encapsulate it's putting the, as you put it, some guideposts into place that this is what the product's going to be. So everything kind of has to, you don't want to necessarily jam everything into that, especially in a world where you could have a tarot deck and a board game and a role-playing game book, plus you're talking about maybe having a large-scale interactive experience or a LARP.
Oh, yeah.
Not everything's going to fit.
We've been doing those already, yeah.
Yeah, but not everything's going to fit.
I want to do them even bigger.
It's not everything's going to fit into that box, but there are going to be certain limitations you're going to have with a physical product, right? It's going to be the size of your pages. It's going to be the size of the box that you can fit in. There's maybe a cost-benefit analysis. If I go with this smaller package, it's not going to look as impressive, but it's going to be shippable.
Yeah, totally. Oh, shipping, like, does it fit in the envelope for standard rate shipping? I mean, I can't even tell you how many companies we work with where I'm like, just keep a standard size, like.
Yeah, I know. I was one of those people early on. So, but listen, you're going to learn lessons along the way.
Yeah,
and so
of course.
We'll talk a little bit about some of those cost-benefit trade-offs for sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, you have lots of ideas on what to do with the worlds, but I think they're all sort of competing with what work on me next.
Mm-hmm,
I think the tarot deck is definitely the one that sounds like it's the furthest along in terms of a known entity.
Yeah, in my mind, I feel like that's probably going to be the first official published product in the World of Mira. I've done like a couple publishing things as I go on the website and trying to still figure out exactly if that's going to live. Like right now, it's just on my personal Studio Bilanko website, bilanko.com, for anybody who wants to go check it out. I'm also debating, like, do I merge it with 20-sided store? But then that website has got so much stuff going on it already. Do I just kind of create its own website at some point and its own company at some point, like what order do I do things in?
Yeah, I think it's important. That's a good point, actually. You want to make sure so the legal structure of the company who owns the intellectual property is important, but it can be totally separate from the physical. Here are the websites, right? You got 15 websites that go tie to one company. You may want to have, as part of the ownership agreement for the store, we do have this IP, but you can have a different breakdown of ownership for that IP. Like that's a whole different rabbit hole.
Yeah.
I can talk for another hour just on that. But it's important to understand the difference, though. You can have a separate website but still have it tie into the 20-sided, whether it be an LLC or an S corp.
Yeah. Yeah, because like right now, the way I was sort of envisioning it was that Mira would be sort of sole proprietor under Studio Bilanko. So, that's my company that I operate under for my personal projects. And then once I create the product, then I would sell it to 20-sided store just the same way you sold Epigo to 20-sided store.
20-sided store is an authorized distributor for Studio Bilanko.
Exactly.
You just happen to be our owner of the
Exactly.
Of the store. No, but that's a perfectly valid way to set it up. It is important to understand that so all the stakeholders know. And in this case, proprietorship, that's just you. There's nothing wrong with that.
It is important to separate that out because I do have a partner with the store, which is Luis, right? So, how to kind of keep right, because it all comes down to, like, I think at the end of the day, how you're organizing your books. Right?
Yeah, and at some point, it's
accounting.
You don't need a lawyer to write like a little bit of an agreement or a piece of paper saying here's you understand. It's great to have a lawyer look at it if you have those resources. Just a quick note: that contracts aren't necessarily there for when things go bad. It's also when things go right. Right? If all of a sudden some major movie studio comes up and says, "We'd like World of Mira, please."
Yeah.
Well, that's when people start coming out of the woodwork saying, "Well, I want a part of that."
Yeah, and that's where I want to be ready for that. That's like one of my biggest questions and concerns is sort of like, once I start, like, I feel like I'm right. I've got a lot of these kind of projects all sort of like about to go live, the events and this and that and the other thing. And I feel like the more I get it out into the public, the more attraction there's going to be. And that's where I'm going to start to get those offers. And I don't want to say I'm not ready yet. I want to be able to be like, yes, I figured it all out. We can sit down in this meeting and have this conversation now. I don't want to be like, I got to get back to you in 6 months because I got to figure this part of it out, Yep.
No, and that's the right approach to have. And a lot of people don't necessarily start from that place. So it's important, too, to understand the ownership structure of it, too, because there are going to be a lot of costs associated with professionally producing work. And again, self-publishing is professional publishing. You may be not getting paid pro rates, but it's just as difficult. If anything, it's actually, the benefit is you get more of the back end. You get more of the profit margin, and you get complete control over the product. There's a reason I've self-published my own books, and Chris and I decided to publish the game ourselves instead of selling it first. And we made a lot of mistakes along the way on both sides, but we also learned a hell of a lot to the point where, I can answer questions like you have today. But artwork and licensing rights are big deals.
Yes.
So you're going to want to make sure any contracts you have with actual artists detail what happens with the work.
So for the Rainy River Bees books, right? My Jack Para, who is a friend but is also the artist and the interior illustrator for all 3 of the books in the world, as well as the first book of my Iceless Earth series. He's been the artist I work with on everything, but we have a contract in place that if it sells beyond the first X number of copies, then his royalties go up because it's been successful. So I got a good deal early on, but if it does become successful, he benefits as well. And it's exactly the way I'm totally comfortable with that because that's the problem we both want to have, right? I make less margin, but my work is really popular.
Yeah, and I find also, when you bring in other people that way too, they want to help you market because they want to be successful too. So that just kind of helps you overall and everything, right?
No, it does. It does. And working with people that you trust is a really big part of it. When it comes specifically to art, one of the questions you had raised, the other way to go about it is stock images or stock video or movies.
Sure.
Shutterstock's one of the big players in that. Adobe stock is a big one. You have to be audio for the podcast intro I have, right? You have to be really careful and read the fine print there.
Yeah,
right?
I know.
It can be very cheap and affordable.
Yeah.
If you're talking about art for 50 cards, it's a way more. Don't pay an artist to make 50 cards unless you have like a friend that's involved in the project and you're independently wealthy. Because
I know. Or you want to take 5 years to make your tarot deck, which is what I'm doing.
Or know where you have to spend the money. You may want a professional artist to make your own custom art on the box of the tarot thing because you know that's an eye-catching art is going to sell. I had a bunch of middle grade science fiction hockey books. I needed to invest in the cover of the books. Yeah. I knew it needed interior illustrations. Over 75% of my budget for all 3 books went into the artwork.
Right. Yeah. I know. I mean, I've got a friend of mine, Kit Malone, is doing the artwork, and he's amazing. And the tricky part with Mira is that because it's only developed in my mind just so far, and I have a very, I was a professional photographer before opening up the store, so I kind of also know a little bit about wanting to maintain artists' rights for your work and things like that. And, and so I kind of get that. I get it from that end of it. If you're going to use my photography, I'm going to lease it to you for a certain amount of time for a certain amount of publishing rights or whatever. Yep. But so I'm working with a friend of mine to do custom art for the cards. And it's been a really amazing collaborative process because I'm sitting down while he's painting and telling him the stories and he's just bringing them to life. So I couldn't ask for a better creative process, but it is definitely going to make it so that this first print run, I have to crowdsource and pre-sell, and there will not be profits on the first 1,000 copies. The second print run, it'll be profitable, but the first print run will just break even on my costs. I'm okay with that, but definitely something I've had to come to terms with this project.
No, and listen, not everyone's going to have the advantage of having friends that they had from other realms that came over and have those sort of resources, right? So there are ways of bootstrapping it. In the episode notes for today's episode, I will have a longer list of sources you can go to find artwork. It's just understanding what you're actually buying from, let's say, Shutterstock or a lot of the online music sites or if you're doing a YouTube series, right? We're trying to, especially for digital distribution, it's understanding there may be limits where you can't publish this beyond a certain number of copies, or it's not meant for professional distribution. It's just for personal use.
Yeah.
So definitely read the fine print.
With fonts too, so even Google fonts, sometimes they're open source and they're public, but then that can change. You have to know which ones are actually for life going to be available for commercial usage and which ones might eventually have a licensing fee on them, which is something I just learned about.
Yeah.
Right.
And remember how Creative Commons is a great way to validate that it's okay to use, but you have to give attribution to make sure in your work you give attribution.
Yes. And I think a lot of people get into that. I see that a lot with people who create Dungeons and Dragons, little zines set in, 5e. Because if you go, to their open source of the rules, they have a 2-page contract that has to be printed in your material. And we've had a lot of indie game designers who've come to us and they're said, hey, will you sell our book? And we're like, we can't because you didn't publish the rights pages in the back of your thing. We want to sell this, but we will get in trouble if we sell something that you didn't properly print. I'm so sorry that you already printed it, but you got to go back and reprint it.
It's a great point. I think I had it a little later in my notes, but it's
you're going to want to make sure if you're coming up with a product, go talk to people that sell those sort of products. Like, what is important to you? And most store owners will take the time to answer some of your basic questions. If you go in with a list of, for 5 hours, like, hey, I got to actually run a business here. But you should be talking to your friendly local game store, or if you're a writer, you want to go into independent bookstores, and their wealth of knowledge from both what distributors they use, who do they trust, who do they not trust, who's doing things, what other creators are doing things in the field that are selling well or are being well critically received. Yeah, those are important questions to ask, and a lot of people are nervous to ask the question. So even if you're listening to this and don't have any resources, you probably have more than you think.
Yeah, and also because we get just to kind of go on the for other people. We'll come back to me eventually, but but we do get a. I know you mentioned off screen earlier that just about how to price your product, and that is one of the things that we get most often too, where people just don't really know how to. They factor in their costs and they factor in the price that they want to sell to their customers at the MSRP price, but they don't think about how that's going to look once they decide that they don't want to sell it themselves and they want to put it into distribution or into somebody else's hands. So that breakdown of like what your profit margin really needs to be, even if you're like, well, I don't really need that big of a profit margin for just me. But if you really want your product to succeed and be big, you are not going to be able to sell it at that level by yourself, right? And you are going to have to find a distributor. And so if you didn't price it right, it's going to cause so many complications down the line.
And there's a simple
things. I'm like, think about that before you print,
And you'll find this advice if you dig far enough online. But the basics of it are, let's say 20-sided store sells a game for $10. You're probably buying that for distributor for roughly 40 to 60% of MSRP.
Yeah, we want to have 50% or more markup because like 40%, it's like, especially in New York City, like how are we even staying in business?
Bingo.
We've got employees, we've got rent that is really at premium prices. Maybe if you are somewhere where minimum wage is really low and you're paying people minimum wage, like we pay all of our staff well above minimum wage because we want to keep them around. Right there, you've got so many costs to think of. And if the majority of the product that you're selling in your store is something that you don't manufacture, right? Something that somebody else manufactures, you have to be getting a 50% or better markup. But a lot of people do squeeze it and go with 40. And for smaller companies or people who are really new, or somebody that we really, really want to support, we'll do 40%. But it's really hard. We have to really want to support that person at, when we take those lower margins.
And you're taking the inventory risk, right? Let's be charitable here and say 50%. So now that game is being purchased from a distributor, most likely for $5. Mm-hmm. That distributor is also, they're warehousing all of your inventory. They're the ones distributing it. They're dealing with all the purchase orders, the invoicing. They're chasing down unpaid invoices from other stores. Yeah. So let's be charitable here, and just for the sake of easy math, let's say they take 10%, which would be the lowest thing you're going to get, especially these days. Yeah. So now you're making now it's $4. Then your manufacturer, right? Most creatives are not the ones actually sitting there like with a printing press making their own book. Right. Maybe some small independent RPG makers are they having a letterpress.
You're making small print runs, but the second you want to make a million copies, you're not sitting there hand screening a million copies.
Yeah, so you're talking 10 to 20% of that cost is going to be your manufacturer's profit margin, and you may owe royalties to your artists, to your layout team, to your if you're more. Now, again, if you're digital first, a lot of these costs go away, which is something to look at. Ebooks.
Some things could just be the one-time upfront cost versus the recurring costs.
So let's just say, again, let's take the manufacturer at 10%. Your royalties maybe or other ancillary costs on the 10%. There's $1 left for you. That's before you now think about all the other costs that come out of that $1. Yeah. So you're going to have licensing rights. If you have Shutterstock, we mentioned before, something like that. Software and services you're using to produce the work. Editing and layout fees, which are, again, usually one-time costs that you can amortize or spread out over. If you make 1,000 copies and you spend $1,000, it's $1 a copy. Yeah. Shipping. Do you need to set up a business for the project? Every state, if you even LLC, so I live in New Jersey, right? It's about $200-something a year. Your website domain, well, it's 10 or $15 a year, but then you have website hosting, which is usually $5
I know
to $10 a
everything's
month.
subscription based now, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So
Well,
they're not just one-time fees. You got
listen,
a monthly
I
fee
have
or a yearly fee,
I have the Adobe Creative Cloud because I do things both in the graphic design world and the writing and now the audio world and video editing. I get all these great tools and all these great resources, but it's $600 a year, right?
Yeah.
So there are cheap free resources that again they're the pro and the con. You got to be careful what cost you're incurring here, and you can bootstrap these things. But promotional materials, you're gonna want bookmarks for retailers to have out, or maybe some promotional stickers. I know with the Bees books, I went to carstickers.com, a free plug, and every little helmet sticker with the Rainy River Bees logo cost me 10 cents. I get them made 1,000 at a time. To keep that cost at 10 cents, not $1.50 a sticker.
Yeah, and it's nothing, but it adds up. And so, right, so it's like, how can you make sure that if you can factor that into your margins from the beginning, then it's going to help you grow your business, help you know that you've got that room to grow. And so I always say, if this is just a one-off and you're never planning to do this again and you never want to make this game again, this is just going to be a one-time, small print run, then do whatever you want. But if you actually want this to become a business, then think about the top, the furthest that you think you could go with it, and then work your way back. Don't think about where you're at right now, right? And I think that's where a lot of new game designers kind of fall into that trap. So many will come all, bright-eyed and like, I made this thing, will you sell it? And I was like, how much is it? And they're like,
well, and to be honest,
how much do you want to pay me for? You're like, oh no.
So people go, I'll go the online I'll go to the online retailers, right? And let's put aside the fact that it really screws the brick and mortar stores who are the ones building communities around your product. That's a whole different discussion, right?
Yeah.
I love working independent all around. I'd love to avoid Amazon. Sometimes you have to avoid them. You still need to be on those marketplaces. But listen, if I sell a book at a show, I'm making a heck of a lot more money than if I'm selling it on Amazon.
Well, and that's the thing too. If you're a game designer and you sell direct, take that extra money. That's yours. Like but you're selling one at a time. When you sell to the distributor or the warehouse, you're selling a pallet load at a time. And when you're selling to me, you're selling a case at a time. So, you're taking less of a profit margin, but you're selling more quantities at a time, right?
But you're also
sorry, yeah.
No, it's also important thing from your perspective too. If someone comes to you and say, "Hey, I want to sell your product," and I say, "Well, all right, I'll sell it for $25." If you go, you're going to look that product up online. If it's available online for $5-10 less, or they've done a big Kickstarter, they probably sold most of the copies they're going to sell. Why are you going to take the inventory risk?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. You never want to sell your game less than direct. You never want to sell it less than what other people just sell it at. So that's why. And I think now there is, like even restrictions on, they call it map pricing, like how much you can, or an online retailer could discount, a game for or whatever. But, I always tell game designers, if you're going to sell to me, I need to be able to sell it at the same price that you're selling it at. So if you're listing it on your website for $12, for an indie RPG zine, then I want to sell it for $12.
Yep.
But if your margins are not, you didn't factor it in that, like actually to be able for me to get a 50% markup and for you to get the amount of money that you want on your game, if that game actually needs to be sold at $15 or $20, we all need to raise our price.
and you're gonna and you're gonna have to back that up with the marketing to help drive the customers to the stores and to the retailers.
Right.
And
because ultimately, like we as a retailer, we are doing the heavy lifting of the marketing of your game. Like our staff is on full time talking about your game, recommending it to people who we think it would be good for. And I think there's a lot of, I talked to the creator and founder of Die Hard Dice, and he keeps mentioning to me over and over and over again how it wasn't until like years later when he came and visited the store and he saw our display of his product that he really realized how much we do to sell his dice and to promote his dice and to get his dice out into the world. And that kind of changed his whole perspective on dealing with retailers in general. So just to go back to your earlier statement, talk to retailers.
Yes,
before you print, before you manufacture.
Even when you're you're coming out with your product, understand what a sell sheet looks like, right? It's usually a one pager, 8.5 by 11.
I'm clipping this and I'm going to put this like on my like seriously, like I don't even think half of the indie game designers that we work with even know what a sell sheet
So
is.
what I'll actually do too in the episode notes, I will give people the original sell sheet for Epigo, which is the first board game that Masquerade Games produced, the first major one, as well as for the Rainy Ruby's books. You see what difference looks like between them. So, and these are actual sell sheets that I gave to a lot of retailers and to distributors to understand what the product was and how you have to market it.
Yeah. Because that's crucial. Like we want to know how we can best describe your game to set up those expectations for the people that are buying it. So when we say this game plays like this, and if I've never played that game, I need to be pretty accurate because I find that my customers, they kind of know. They know when you haven't played the game. You know, and if I've demoed it, they're kind of like not sure. But if I've played it, it's just like, I don't know, you just talk about it differently and you just know different things about it. So the more information or even playthrough videos, anything that you can share that can be helpful for somebody, for us and for the staff to be able to promote your game, the better, right?
Yeah, so. and filming a how to play video, how to teach the game videos, right? You don't have to publicly put that on YouTube. You can have a private Vimeo link you send to retailers on the sell sheet saying, here's how to promote the game or here's how to sell it. Those are really critically important, especially for games. There's a lot of production costs to go into that. It's a lot of work, but it's one thing. It's like, you know, I would go into 20-sided store on a weekly basis, right? Whether I was playing Magic or just going to see you guys and play as part of the community. But if you're trying to distribute this on a wider scale, not everyone's going to be, you know, Lauren Bilanko 20-sided that you're friends with.
Right.
There's going to be retailers who have never heard of you, never heard of, you know, Croyder Studios or 20-sided store or Studio Bilanko, that you need to trust you. And so you have to do things the way professionals do them. You have to have that layer of business acumen. So you have to find out what the industry does. And you have to follow it to a certain extent. You can think of marketing as the quote I love. I believe it's the Derek Sivers, but marketing is the final extension of your art. It might be Seth Godin. I don't remember. I'll post that quote in the episode notes. But you can be creative within that. Like you have fun with it, right? I always try to find ways of sneaking that fun in. But at a certain point, like if you have a board game, like you have to have a page on Board Game Geek. You have to maintain it. You have to have the how to play videos. You got to have good pictures.
Yeah, well, and there's so many factors that go into play. Like everything you said just kind of spurred so many thoughts in my head for people, which is like, you know, one, when you're playtesting your game, sometimes you might have an idea of who you think is going to be attracted to your game, but then the more you play with people, you realize you're actually reaching a totally different market base. And then you want to make sure that your art matches the market of the people that are going to be interested in your game. Like there's this one company that we work with that their games are amazing. I love them. They're easy to learn. They're like the perfect games for the type of customers that I have, except the artwork looks like kids' artwork. And we're an adult store, so I just can't sell those games to adults, even though I know that if they actually bought it and played it, it would be the perfect game for them. So it's sort of like the art isn't matching up with the expectation of what might be inside of it. And trust me, a lot of people judge a game by its cover. I've sold so many games that nobody in our store knows anything about. They just walk off the shelf because they look beautiful.
And knowing where to make that investment is very important, right?
Yeah.
Like they may have gone with a hand-drawn artwork because it was very cheap or free. You know, it was Creative Commons, whatever it is, and that's great. But if it doesn't serve the end product, you're really shooting yourself in the foot. It's a great example too.
Yeah.
But I want to just for a second we touched on it briefly before, but I think it's really important for the audience to understand economies of scale. Yeah. And so I want to take the two extremes. The first is you're going to make things in a quantity of one, so print on demand. The pros are there's no real overhead for, you know, you're not paying crazy storage costs, shipping costs. The problem is the actual cost per unit is very high, right? So you're making less profit margin on it. So when I print my books, I usually try to do it 60, 100 at a time. So I don't have my whole closet full of books. It's a cash flow issue too, you know, because I'm not selling them on a huge scale right now. I'm not doing but you can also do it on a much larger side where you're doing bulk printing, where you're going to a professional print house. I'm getting 10,000 copies made. Your cost per copy is going to be a lot less. So you'll get higher profit margins, but you're also then talking to distributors. They're taking their cuts. You're getting into more stores. You have inventory risk. You have cash flow issues, which again, we'll talk about crowdsourcing in a minute. But
maybe you made it, and a major retailer like Walmart or Target or somebody, not to single anyone out, wants your product in their stores. A lot of those contracts you have to be careful, because if they don't sell in 6 months, they're jamming them right back down your throat.
I struggle with this one myself, and this is a great topic to segue into for Mira stuff too, because or even just 20-side store products. Like I've designed our own t-shirts, and I've done a bunch of little indie zines that I just, I don't have ISBNs for, which we got to talk about how to do that. But, a lot of things that like I just kind of would just print. Sometimes some of the earlier adventures that I published myself, I just printed on my own printer and just made print runs. Like, so I did my own print on demand, and I would just run them off on the print. I went and had like really nice covers made, but then the inside I would just print on my regular printer, and I got one of those staplers, and I would just make 10 at a time. And as I sold them, I would just make 10 more. And it was great,
Yeah, it's a great way to do it.
Yeah. And then, with t-shirts and stuff like that, we went with the local silk screener, and our business mostly sells games. So we don't really have an apparel section, but I really thought it was important to have some, branded shirts, and every once in a while
gotta have the merch.
Artists, have some merch. People always want merch, but the merch is something that I, definitely have been leaning more towards going print on demand with, even though I want to support Pete's Print Shop so much. They're amazing silk screeners, by the way. We would be ordering, in order to make it cost effective for them to screen everything, we would be getting at least 10 in every size. And then you want to have multiple colors, or you want to have multiple designs. So, and you start getting hoodie sweatshirts, that stuff doesn't pack down really small. So, half of our storage just becomes bins and bins and bins of backstock of t-shirts and sweatshirts that maybe we sell, a handful a month. Like, we're not moving them in the same way that we're selling board games. And when we buy board games from distributors, we don't have to buy 100 or 200 at a time. I can buy 6 at a time, or 2 at a time, or even 1 if I only wanted 1. I mean, that's kind of the beauty of working with distribution. Obviously you get, better deals when you get a case. And then, and then same thing, like, so with the tarot deck, I'm like, well, I could go print on demand, but then when you start getting into printed paper goods, it's really tough for there to be consistency, because they're not being printed all at once. So there could be color shifts in some of the things. And so it depends on like how detailed you want that to be, right? So that I'm struggling with that right now. Like, do I want to make a cheaper print on demand version, but then have like a higher end, like where I'm, maybe have to be a little bit more detailed if I do like a gold leaf or something where the print cannot be off,
Yeah, I think print on demand, especially in the gaming space, is getting a little bit more accepted, just because the quality's gotten a lot higher. The tools have gotten better. Even when Masquerade Games was being started, and this is 2008, 2009, like it really even wasn't a Kickstarter, wasn't even. So you kind of had to make it yourself with printers and like the sticky note paper, print on that, stick it on the back of crappy Magic cards, and that was your game. And like, that's how you prototype. Now you can go online, and again, I'll have a whole list of these resources specifically for game manufacturers. But like the Game Crafter is the one we always use. You get a professional looking prototype with very consistent coloring and ink, and it's one of the finest companies in the gaming space. They have their own distribution network and everything too. So that's the one that Masquerade Games has used for years and years and years. So for the books, I had this fun little card game, Intergalactic Hockey Showdown, that was really just kind of a marketing tool. But I got one booster pack. You can get actual booster packs made for your game that are randomized or a fixed number of cards. It's 15 cards in a pack that are very professionally printed.
So
very consistent.
Is Game Crafter print on demand?
But they have a store page, so you can buy the game right on there, and they will print it, ship it, deal with everything, and I make like a couple cents. I didn't make the game to make a lot of money. It was just a fun little tie-in, but I'm reusing the artwork from the cover of the book. And so it's one of the important points here is if you're building a world, you're building a product, there may be other things that you can do, merch, a tie-in game, a tie-in tarot. Even the tarot, all this art you're doing for the tarot deck, you can reuse that in all your books and manuals if your license allows it. So you can probably get other things that either help to flesh out the world, give your fans more unique things. You can have them as giveaways or as like bonus tiers for a Kickstarter or a crowdsource. So it's good to know where you can reuse some of your own content and have these nice print-on-demand resources. Maybe you only have to buy 5 or 10.
Yeah. No, the print on demand resources are super crucial. And I'm always like, a lot of time, for a lot of these printers, I tried to source like so many different ones for the Terra deck. Like I wanted to see the boxes and I wanted to see the card quality before, because it's like, if I'm going to make 1,000 copies, like I don't want to spend like so much, like all my savings, to create this first printing of a game and then just have it not be right.
Correct.
But a lot of times, even when they give you the sample packs, it's still kind of sometimes I feel like hard to know. So it's always great to have a recommendation of somebody who's worked with the company and knows that they're reliable and that
you want my golden rule for self-publishing or any realm.
Yes.
Even if you're gonna so Epigo, right? Chris and I, our first initial production run was 2,500 from top German board game manufacturer at the time, which is Ludofact. I don't even know. I don't know. Ludofact in Germany, but again, this is going back to 2008. Okay.
Yeah,
but
I did find a place called Ludo Cards out of Italy that I was thinking about working with. So I was like, oh, is it the same company?
We'll talk about that in a second. But so I've done it on both sides. But my golden rule is and any professional printer will do this. They will provide you a sample. They will. Yeah. You're still paying for all of the dies and fixtures and the printing up front, so you're committing to that run. But they're still going to send you one saying, hey, does this look good? You do the same thing for self-publishing. You always print one copy of the book. It may take longer, self-gratification. It's nice to get that package of the first copy of it. There's going to be problems. Your binding might be a little screwed up, right? You may have, the artwork cut off weird there, or I don't really like how the blue came out. Maybe it's a little lighter. Always, always, always. Even if you're going to get it professionally published, maybe go to a print-on-demand shop. It's a pain in the butt to change all the files around, but go make a print-on-demand copy just to see what the product looks like. And guess what? It's a great tool if you're making how to play videos, how to market videos. You have actual printed products for those videos that you can then use in your rule book for the final product or online to sell the product before or to use for your Kickstarter to fund the product.
I was going to say, even depending upon the kind of product that you're making too, like if it's a book or cards, a lot of those print on demands are so cheap that you could even just do it for your play testing, right?
Yeah,
and then just change it and change it.
I never play test with production quality stuff. But again, print on demand now is production quality, right?
Yeah, it's crazy.
And it's usually within the same country. So let's talk about the Ludofact in Germany, right? So we were the idiots that designed a 2-player abstract strategy game before Kickstarter with a box that was 12.5 inches by 12.5 inches. Which is a really bad dimension for shipping.
But I liked the idea that it was not going to have a seam in the middle of the board.
We were so hell-bent on this. And the guy told us, he warned us on 5 different occasions how stupid this was. But here's the problem. When you print 2,500 copies of a game of that size. Yeah. It's 11 pallets. So that's a container ship. Like, a big container ship. You see them coming across the seas with thousands and thousands of containers. Each one of those can hold anywhere between 40 to 60 pallets, depending on size and stackability. So we're talking I paid for a quarter container shipping, so it's less than containers. Now you're sharing with other companies, so your shipping time goes bananas right off the start, right? It took us months to get these things. They're coming in from some port. In this case, I believe it was Chicago. Then they're getting on either a rail car or a truck. They're going to a distribution center. In this case, it was from Indiana. It barely got there in time for Gen Con, which was when we were having a big debut. We spent $4,000 in marketing to go to Gen Con to debut the game. We got there 4 days before. So we rented a car to go drive to Fort Wayne, load a car with as many copies as we can get from the warehouse, bring it back to Gen Con. 297 of these games in a car because it was 12.5 inches by 12.5 inches. Dumb, but we were hell bent on the wrong. We had our vision.
You learn.
Well, no, but we were so hell bent on the playability of our game. Like we got a top printer, my copy here is it's 14 years old. It's still in great condition. It's seen thousands of plays. Right, we were so bent on that experience, but we didn't think about it from a profitability standpoint. We brought 300 copies with us. We brought 270 back because Gen Con wasn't necessarily a sales show; it was a marketing show. So we learned a lot of hard economic lessons ahead of time. And, we were lucky where, it was a side project. It wasn't our main primary source of income. But if you are thinking of it making this a business, you need to think about it from a business standpoint as much as a marketing, right? The better thing to do would have been to not put pieces for 4 players, but for 2. Have a foldable board. So now your game comes in a small package. You can sell it for $20, not $30. So you're already going to increase your sales that way. You're going to make more profit per game. And now your game is being shipped on 3 pallets instead of 11. And nowadays, that math is really, really challenging. A container from overseas, a full container, let's say from most of the board game printers are in China. There are some in Europe. But either way, you're paying you used to pay about $5,000 for US.
to get a container from overseas. Right now, that's around $18,000 to $19,000. And you're also dealing with currency exchanges. You may have said you're dealing with that too. You go to Europe right now. Now is a great time to buy from Europe because the euro versus the dollar. It used to be $1.50. But if you have a 6-month production window, that can shift a lot. Right.
Well, then so my other question is, because I know a lot of people, they're like, they just get it shipped to their house and now they're dealing with all these pallets of games in their apartment in New York that's like 500 square feet. Crazy, right? Clearly you want to make this relationship with the distributor so that those pallets can just be shipped directly to them first, right? So
and your
how
family.
do you do that if your game doesn't even exist yet,
There's so many creative people that will have a basement full of like failed production and there's nothing wrong. Like you make some mistakes. Like I still have cases of Epico in my basement. I'll use myself as an example. But if you live in rural Montana and have a spare barn that you can have containers full of merch and everything else, great. But you also want to keep it.
Start your own shipping right out of your own house.
You don't want your kitty cat using it as your board games as a litter box, right? There are other challenges. A professional distributor they're also insured. So if there's a fire, you don't lose your entire investment. There are lots of things that go into these conversations, and they're not easy. It's not. None of this is sexy.
Right.
You want to start with the World of Mira. You have this passion. You want to be focusing on the work, but sorry, if you want to run a business, you have to run the business. You can't just do the artwork, or the creative output. Now, you can just be the creative type, but that's when you're going to a professional, whether it be a publisher, finding an agent. You're going to one of the bigger board game publishers. This is their whole. They have an entire staff to deal with all this. But guess what? Then you're now getting a royalty, a small percentage. And you're knocking on doors saying, "Hey, will you publish my product?" Better be damn good.
And I know people who've gone that route. Well, I know people. Yeah. So there's a couple of game designers that we work with that have done all the different aspects, right? Like we've got one book designer who uses drive-through RPG, and they actually will order a case for themselves, and then they sell us like the 10 copies or whatever. So they kind of do their own. They will order from their own print on demand. So
I do that too.
You can do that too, which works, right?
That's a really great point, actually. So when I print on demand, I'll get about 100 copies. Like I said, I had a bunch of hockey rinks they'll have in their pro shop. They'll buy 2 or 3. I have them on consignment. Next time I'm in there, I'll stop by. Like a lot of them are local. I can do this. But you know what? Like you don't take any inventory risk. They're still my copies. If you sell them, let me know. I'll come out and bring more.
Yeah, and it does take a while. So
it takes a while.
We have to know that up front when we want to reorder. If we run out, we're not going to be able to get them right away. It's going to take her. She has to place the order on her end, and then it's going to take her a while. So we've had that conversation with her, and we know that that's how her end of the production works. So we know that if we're down to 5 out of the 10, that's when we should kind of place the reorder. Kind of planning ahead, or just be okay with running out.
And you know what though? And that's a great point. And one of the other benefits of it is if you're doing print on demand, you're not making a huge outlay up front. And so let's say down the line that this woman comes in and you get some feedback from you and say, hey, like the artwork's just not selling, or the packaging is really tough on this one. You can pivot, right? You say, okay, you know what? Let me come up with revision 2. Great example. I'll go back to myself here. The Bees books, right? The first edition had a different binding, 1 or 2 little typos that weren't a huge deal. Published a sequel. I went back and said, this is now version 2. So there was, so now they all say book 1, but it talks about being a series. But now you look them on the shelf, they're all the same. They have a cohesive graphical element. I just carried it through the third one. But I didn't have 5,000 sitting in it. Like, well, I can't do that because I got to sell those first or I'm going to go broke. And so print on demand, you can react more. So if people really aren't digging it, make some tweaks to it. And that's one of the, if you're bootstrapping this, that's definitely a much better way to go because you can learn these lessons on the fly without breaking the bank or don't incur credit card debt over this. You can avoid it too.
No, do not use
a credit card.
Well, that's why I'm publishing a lot of the Mira stuff on the website right now because there's so many changes. Like I changed the name, like we had elves and I was like, well, I don't want to do elves. I want to, because they're more human based. And so then they were elders, but then I was like, but then everybody thinks of them as being old. But the idea was that here's a race or a sapient that does live a long life, but they were born at some point. They were under 100 at some point. So the elder sage is something that would be like when they take their rites of passage when they're 100 years old. So what do we call them when they're younger? So I came up with a name called the Safina. So the
Yep.
name of just this sapien has changed 4 times, and I don't want to put that in print yet. Because
Yeah.
what if it changes again? What if other things change? So as I'm still world building and still making a lot of these decisions, it is nice to have it published in a way where I can start to share with people and get that feedback and see what's working and what's
Yep.
not working. But I don't feel super committed yet. I've gone so many different directions where I was like, I'm going to print these modules that we've been running. Like I've already created 4 chapters for a whole year of like 16 to 24 different adventures, and they kind of all go in sequential order. And
Yep.
I was like, they're already basically written. So I was like, well, let's just edit that and then get that published and printed. But because we added all this world stuff, we have to go back and change some of the details because nothing existed outside of Black Bottom when we wrote those adventures. And now that the whole world exists, we have the rest of the continent. We have the name of the waterway. We have all these other locations and stuff that we can actually have names to, that we can name and describe out in a little bit more detail. So the tarot deck has kind of become the thing that's going to be the first thing that goes out, because it's so far, the history that's in the lore that's going to be written in that about the world is so far in the past, and it's before the Great Calamity. So it's fine if everything after that changes anyway.
But it's important. So it's 2 points here, right? And it's good. It's a great example. But keep in mind that when you produce a product, whether it be a book, a module, whatever, it's not going to be perfect. There's going to be flaws. There are going to be things you wish you did. But if you let that fear stop you from producing the product, that's how we started this, right? You could be in this perpetual world building. I mean, at some point, you got to write the thing. You got to produce. You got to ship. And accept its flaws. Like this book versus book 3. Again, I'm not trying to make this all about me, but I'd go back but I'm not going to go back and rewrite it, because that was the first book I wrote in the series, and it means a lot to me. Like, there may be opportunities on RPG where you can expand upon the world, or you could, at some point you might have to do a second revision because maybe you screwed up an IP thing. There may be a reason why you have to do it, but don't let it stop you from drawing that line instead of in sand, in cement. Producing some work, getting it out there in the world, and that can hold people back.
I know that my best work is when I've been on a deadline, where like I self-published a Salt and Lake adventure, and it was because it was for an event with Jupiter Disco Bar. So it was like we had 2 weeks. I had 1 week essentially to write it, and we had 1 week to get it printed. And it was just this collaboration, and we were going to run an event. And I was like, it was an alcohol company who had a lot of money to throw at it. So I was like, this is a great opportunity for me to get this printed and published, and not just for the event, so people had something to go home with as a take-home item that was super unique and original for this event. And so it's like the budget was there, so I was like, I had to make it happen, but I had to write a complete adventure, a whole basically setting and story in like a week. And sure, there's a million typos. We didn't get copy editing on it. I'm working with a copy editor now to do the print run of it, but it was out and it's published. And people, I think, eventually will probably want to have that first print run, as like a keepsake, because I can tell you right now, working on the second print run, even the layout and design, everything's going to be very different. And we're going to put it into the World of Mira, because before it was also just this little lake town that didn't exist anywhere, Oh,
for sure. But those constraints could be a deadline too. Like, hey, Gen Con's coming up, or whatever. In our case, like that can breed a lot of creativity, right? Chris and I didn't want to be a single game company. So we came up with a game, and we went through professional card printer. And we made it designed, printed, and bagged. Again, we used burlap sacks from a local home creative store in 3 weeks. And it sold more than the game we spent multiple thousands of dollars printing and shipping.
I'm not going to lie. I literally will create events through the store just to give myself deadlines to have to get something done by,
Yeah, and that's... But having a printing deadline and maybe starting, thinking more like a project manager, say, I need to have this done by this date, helps spur the creativity, because you're on a deadline. And self-imposing them, or going out there in the world saying, I'm going to produce this by February of 2023, you're on the hook now. And accountability can be a huge driver for both, your own work and your own creativity. And some people work great under that. I know I do. I like having a line, like I want to get this done by a certain date. Sometimes you have to shift that date for good reasons, but be honest with yourself. But also go out there, put yourself out there, be accountable. That's really great advice, I think, for bootstrapping yourself, because then the people that are holding you accountable can also help you with resources. You can put out an APB like, I need an artist fast.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like, so, for me, a lot of the things that I've done really fast, it's just like, it's an idea that I had and I just did it and I don't have to answer to anybody and I can just get it out. Right.
Yeah.
The projects that I find really take time or are harder to project manage are the ones where I'm collaborating with a lot of people. You've got the artists, but you've got the graphic designers, and then you've got to source the printers, and you've got copy editors, and now you've got a million different people kind of all working on the project simultaneously, and you're trying to make sure that you're in communication with everybody and everybody has what they need. And I'm good at it. But I know a lot of people aren't. And I don't
Yeah.
think that I'm the best at it, especially on my own projects. I feel like I could probably project manage somebody else's project 100 times better than I could do my own because, I'm second guessing and I'm like, oh, I don't know. That's a good idea too. Should we change the direction?
Yeah. No, but understand there may be professional tools for collaboration. Put a few in the episode notes as well. Things like Notion or Trello are very popular at doing those sort of things. Where you keep the stakeholders involved, where you're not sending out emails all the time, and it can help get everyone on the same page. Really good for attaching things like art elements or brainstorming. Not everything has to be digital. There is a certain amount of face-to-face that's great, but sometimes you're working with people in different countries.
Yeah, that's really nice because I am like, I'll get a text message with the art and then I have to retext it to somebody else. But if it was just on there and everybody saw it in real time.
Yeah, so look at ways of increasing your workflow because otherwise you're just in communication overload. So I have touched on this on several episodes of the podcast too, and those do this a lot. So telling people about more process specific for those sort of workflows will definitely be coming in future podcasts, but I will provide some links in the episode notes for people so they have a few things to go off of. And again, for the audience, feel free to ask a specific question and talk about implementation and be on a future show.
Okay, so I just have two really, I know we've kind of touched on it a little bit already, but one, ISBNs, like, is that just, you just go online and you just order one?
If you want to light fire to $100, yes, it's a great way to do it. And there are reasons why you might want to buy your own ISBN number. So ISBN is International Standardized Book Number. It's now it used to be 10 digits. Now it's a 13-digit number that is unique to your book, and you basically buy the rights to it in perpetuity. It's a global number. UPC is Universal Product Code. UPCs aren't really important for publishing of games and products. If you're going to be in a supermarket or something like that, then you're going to want just a random barcode is different, right? An ISBN is not just a barcode, so don't confuse the two. Barcode is just the actual technology of black lines and white lines that represent a number in a digital format. Right, a barcode can be this. It could be 50 lines long, as long as the thing that's scanning it knows I'm looking for 50 numbers. A barcode can be automatically generated. You can do funky things with it. Now you have QR codes. You can get a QR code made for free online. Right, just go to a QR code generator, and all it is it's the three boxes that oriented the phone camera, and it has a certain, depending on how big your QR code, it has a certain amount of information digitally encoded.
Yeah.
But the ISBN number, the number that's being encoded, is important. Every distributor, every retailer is looking for usually either a barcode, an ISBN number, in some cases both. They need to be formatted a certain way and need a certain amount of white space around it, so you have to factor that into your cover design or your box design. I personally, my experience, I use someone called Lulu.com, which is probably, I think, the biggest player when it comes to books. They do notebooks, printed books, pamphlets, magazines, you name it. They're not a game printer. They don't make cards and things like that. On there, if you make them your distributor, because print on demand, they will give you an ISBN for free.
Okay.
I haven't paid for any of the ISBNs on any of my 5 books. Now, they're listed as the printer. If I went and tried to do my own print run, I had to then buy an ISBN number. A lot of the printers will supply that as part of the fee. Like, that's part of, hey, like, all right, we'll put the ISBN number on it because we're your printer. Now, if you're working with a professional publishing house, they're going to buy them in batches of 100 from the actual source of the agency, and so it's economies of scale. You buy 100 of them; they're very, very cheap. That's what Lulu does.
I see. So you can just get a ton of ISBN numbers and then just apply them to anything that you want. It's not like this ISBN. Once you apply it, then it's attached to that item.
It's attached to that item and that revision of that item.
Not revision of that item.
So the rate for me, the example of the bees, the first book, there's 2 ISBN numbers. There's the first edition, and then there's a second edition.
Right.
And so when you buy that number, it encodes it with the publisher, the title. So the publisher in this case is Lulu, but the title is this. The author is this. The artist is this. This is the publication date. These are the number of pages. ISBNs have a lot of different stuff that goes along with that number. And then there's a central repository with that information. Once you buy the number, like that's locked in.
Yeah.
Think about it like a domain registrar, right? We type in, chriskreuter.com. It knows that like you have to buy your domain so that the domain registrar knows that, it's connected to this server and it belongs to this person. So it's the same sort of thing, but just with printed products. There may be times where you also need a UPC code. Provide some resources to ISBNs and UPCs and some good summary articles on that.
Yeah. Like, why would you need both or one versus the other? Or if you were only going to do one, which is the better one to do?
ISBN. For what we're talking about specifically for your products, ISBN is the bee's knees. So all the major distributors, whether it be Ingram or I think Diamond's still around. Comic books use them as well. There's lots of distributors out there.
I was going to say, like for us, when we get products that don't have barcodes, it's, we generate barcodes for those products, but it's just for our store, right? So they're not, you can't Google them.
Yeah, some stores want a UPC code just so that it's standardized, right? There's a lot of nuance there. But an ISBN number, so you need that for ebooks and digital tool as well. Any digital publication also has so the ebook version and the printed version will have different ISBNs.
Oh, interesting.
Right?
Okay.
An audiobook will have a different ISBN number.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah, because it's like we get,
it's a format too.
There'll be multiple printings of a board game, and we list them. They've got different ISBNs, and that's good because it helps us know that this is a new printing.
What's in your inventory system? If all of a sudden another
it goes right into our inventory system. So it's like, oh, did they update it? And sometimes it looks exactly the same, so you don't even know. But sometimes, there's a drastic difference. So people are looking for the first edition of a game, or they're looking for the second edition of a game because they're not compatible with one another anymore.
Yeah, but they had to reprint it because maybe they lost the rights to an artwork, or they had a card in there that was maybe insensitive or something, right?
Yeah, or sometimes it just gets bought out. Like there were games that were, first published by Rio Grande Games and now are, Asmodee. So
different publisher,
different publishers,
different print, different. So print runs are different, right? So, print on demand, every time they print it, it's not a new ISBN number. As long as they don't change any element of this, the ISBN is still valid. The second I go and change something as a new edition, bingo, bango, new ISBN number.
Yeah. Okay. And you said ISBN numbers are like $100 per-ish?
You can buy them independently. If you buy them in bulk, I think you buy them in batches of 10. They're a little bit cheaper. But obviously, if you're someone like Lulu or these print-on-demand places, they're buying them in bulk, so it's pennies for them. It's part of their value add to the publisher because they're making, again, they get their cut when they print these too. They have their everyone gets their pound of flesh in your product. So
but like if I don't know what I'm going to be using them for, it doesn't really make any sense for me to buy them in bulk, right? Or I can decide what I want to use it for later after I've bought it.
Now, if I'm making 5,000 at a time and I want to retain all rights to all elements of selling my work, then I'm going to want to buy my own ISBN. But I'm not independently wealthy. The joke in the gaming industry is the best way to make a small fortune in games is to start with a large fortune. Right? That's kind of how it works.
Show me the money.
Unless you're doing things like bootstrapping and building your audience over time and not making some really bad financial decisions like sending 11 pallets of board games. And listen, along the way, you're going to learn a lot of hard lessons, but you're also going to learn how to do this stuff for yourself. Self-publishing has a lot of redeeming qualities that you can port over to your day job too. And I've talked about this in some other episodes that are coming up, but look at this as learning opportunities, not just like all this work I got to do, right?
Yeah, that's where I do feel like, we have the outlet because we have the store and we've got the website and we've already got shipping up and running and we've kind of already got methods in place to be able to market and sell things, especially that are related to games. But the second I start creating things that are outside of the gaming industry, then that's where I feel like I want to be. I'm not familiar with those kind of.
You know what? You're doing the right thing. You're listing out your assets that you're starting with. You have a retail space. You have a very strong community. You've got a well thought out world. You've got all these modules have already developed, but you've got the distribution channels, you've got the website, you've got the corporate entity set up already that you can take advantage of. Not everyone's going to have the same things, but you might be bootstrapping, but also you're also a talented graphical artist, or you paint on the side. You may have had paintings that you did when you were younger that are just as relevant. You bring them into the project because you own the rights. You may be independently wealthy and can throw lots of money at the problem. No, you can hire people to everything we've talked about in this episode. You can hire somebody to do.
Right.
You can create your own studio. Your studios.
Yeah.
Not that I'm independently wealthy, but I don't mind investing money and learn the lessons, but I'm in a situation where I can afford to do that to a certain extent. Even then, I'm bootstrapping and self-publishing. I'm I've learned a lot over the years, but can make those decisions. So sit down and list what your assets are, and that's both monetary and talent and maybe things you've already done, and then find out where the gaps are. And either hire consultants to help with that, or at least giving you a roadmap to follow.
Yeah.
Do a lot of online research. You gotta do the work.
Yeah.
But knowing where you don't have to do the work lets you focus in on the stuff that really matters. And also knowing how much time do you have to solve the problem. And this is getting into the nuance of project management. I know we're running a little bit long.
No. Oh, sorry. Are we going on? Because I have one more question that's kind of in line with this. But the other question I have is just like, then, right, how are you sourcing when you need to outsource, right? Like how do you, if you've never done something like this before, how do you know where to even start looking? Like so many people come to me even before I decided to start doing the tarot deck of like, hey, I'm going to get, so great. This has all been really awesome advice. Now, how do I find a printer? And I was like, I don't even know. Like, I haven't done that process. Right. And then going through it for the tarot deck, it was like so much Google searching, like, and really, and so many asking around of like people that I know that have published games. And really, I felt like it was really hard. It was really difficult to find resources there. And then and I feel like I kind of went through that process, but I feel like it's the same question that I have then when I'm also talking about how do you find, like, if I wanted to partner with a publisher to lease the rights to do something with my game, like how would I even start to approach somebody and say, hey, I have this IP or this world that exists, like would you be interested in turning it into something? You know what I mean? Like I don't even know how you would even begin to start that conversation.
There's a lot of different roads that'll lead to where you want to be, but the two pieces of advice I would give you is there's a lot of industry groups out there. So for board games and RPGs, there's the Indie Game Alliance, and I'll put a link in the episode notes, or Board Game Geek, where there's so much information on there. And it's free, available online. You know, you can sign up, be part of this alliance, and get these resources. And I think right now there's like 17,000 independent studios. Not all of them are active. I know Masquerade Games has been a member of that for many, many years, where it'll have those resources available to you. You can ask those questions. They have forums for look up game designers or self-published writers. A lot of times there'll be a forum instead of just doing regular Google searches and get recommendations.
Yeah.
The other thing you can do is you can go into a store that sells the kind of products you're trying to make, whether it be RPGs or things like that. You know, all the major publishers probably aren't going to answer your email if you email and say, hey, who's your printer? Like, we're not going to tell you, right?
No, yeah. Like, I'm not like, I wasn't necessarily asking for the printer. But more so, how do you talk to the publisher?
But ask the owner, hey, are there any independent, like I'm looking to be an independent self-published writer. Are there any books from local indie authors that you sell? And go ask them, hey, can I talk to that person? Can you connect me with them? Or like, you know, buy their product and send them an email, and they will love to talk about their entire process, and they will give you, here's the printer I use, don't avoid them like the plague, or they're great, here's the contact.
Right.
So just walk, and that costs you nothing but time.
Yeah.
Or unless you buy the book, right? If someone bought my book and sent me an email and said, hey, how did you post? I would talk to them for 3 hours for free.
I know, it's true.
And almost every independent author,
everybody who asks me questions.
but people love to share. People love to talk about themselves. I'm sorry to podcast to do just that. But and go on, look for podcasts about publishing. Look for YouTube videos on publishing, and listen to authors talk about their process, and you will just get just take notes.
No, that's totally
and I think it's better because you get more context around it than just doing a Google search. And when you go into that conversation with the printer, you're going to know a lot more about what to ask for, what to avoid, maybe what to make sure you have in your contract with them or your agreement with them. Looking like if you've listened to this podcast this far, thank you. But also you'll have gotten some ideas of what some pitfalls. And
because I found kind of like two roads where one is like they list just all the prices and everything online, and it's really easy. You just upload your files, and then it just spits out an estimate for you, and it's like, but you don't talk to a human, right? So there's no like, is this really, am I ordering the right thing that I mean to be ordering? I'm not sure. I'm looking at your videos and I think it's right, but I'm not really exactly right. And then the other extreme that I found is you can only make an appointment with somebody and it's hard to, know what to ask, right? So I think your advice is great to just kind of get the vocabulary, get the lingo, watch a ton of stuff, ask a lot of questions before even getting it to that point.
Yeah,
right?
and that's part of what Chris, and part of why I have this podcast is also to answer questions like this, put it in a public forum so people have more resources to know what to go to. So if there are any follow-up questions, like I'm happy to talk more about this in future episodes, maybe have you back on. We can maybe get some Q&A from people, like, get some feedback and have a second session. And this has been awesome. Thank you so much for joining the podcast today. There is going to be an insane amount of episode notes on this. So again, thank you so much, Lauren. Maybe tell people real quick where they can check out 20-Sided Store in the World of Mira.
Yeah. So 20sidedstore.com, all spelled out. We are in Brooklyn, New York. You can find us online. You can shop online. We ship everywhere in the United States, hopefully around the world at some point, but not quite yet. Studio Bilanko, Bilanko.com. It's Bilanko.com is where I'm hosting all the World of Mira stuff right now. And some of my other personal painting and drawing and things like that you can kind of explore if you really want to know everything there is to know about me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, and I hope we can continue the conversation in your future.
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome.
So excited. Thank you so much for having me. Bye.
Thanks.
If you feel that Chris dealt with it, I'd appreciate your support of the show by sharing it with someone who might benefit. Ratings on your favorite podcast player are also helpful in growing the audience. Visit chriskreuter.com for free downloadable PDFs with notes and resources from today's episode, sign up for the CDWI mailing list, or to send in your problems or requests for future shows. That's CHRISKREUTER.com, or use the link in the show notes. Thanks for listening to Chris will deal with it.